Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here with some recent historical fiction favorites. So I love doing this video kind of every 5 to 6 months. I think the last one I did was 6-ish months ago, so I will link that one below as well, because in today's video I'm here to talk about some recent historical fiction favorite books that I've read since that last video. So these are going to be all new historical fiction favorites that I have enjoyed in the past 6 months. I have 10, possibly 11 to talk about today, and I am so excited. So we're going to jump into them. Of course, as always, if you ever want to see more of my thoughts or full reviews on any of these books, any of the books that I ever talk about in my videos, I do review every book that I read. You can see all my reviews on Goodreads, which is linked in the description box. Also in the description box, I have linked every book that I'm talking about in this video, all of the book titles and author names. So if you want to go grab them for yourself as well, they're all linked below for you. So let's get into it. All right, so before jumping into this first one, I run a historical fiction book club with my friend Tori from Novel Life, where we read a historical fiction book every month. And then we have a live show on each of our YouTube channels where we talk about the book, talk about all of our thoughts for that month's book club read. So if you ever want to join that and read a historical fiction book with us every month, we have our Instagram linked below, which is Leave It to the Pros Book Club. On there, we share our bookly month pick, our live show dates. Sometimes we do historical fiction readathons, so we put all of that info there. So definitely check that out. This first book was actually one of our spring book club picks. So this is One Good Thing by Georgia Hunter. This was my first time reading this author, and I really enjoyed this one. This is a World War II historical fiction book following two friends in Italy. I always love reading historical fiction books, especially like World War II historical fiction books, where it's kind of in a different setting, maybe a different side story that I wasn't familiar as much with. So in this book, we follow Lily and Esty, and basically they become friends when they are in college and university together, and we kind of see their friendship over the years. And here they end up sharing a house together when they are in college together, so they're roommates for a bit. We follow on with their friendship throughout the years, so we see one of them getting married, one of them has a child, and kind of just all of these things changing in life with them. This book is set in the 1940s in Italy, so we get kind of an overview of Mussolini, racial laws, etc. kind of happening in Italy at the time during World War II. This book in here, we end up following Lily and Esty when Esty and her young son are in hiding. Esty ends up getting gravely injured along the way early into the book, and then you see her really desperately kind of asking her friend Lily to take her young son Theo and to take him get to safety, and that Esty plans to get better, heal up, and then meet them at their kind of rendezvous point. This book's filled with so much action and kind of them traveling along the way. You see them kind of trying to seek sanctuary along the way, figuring out friends or people that they can rely on or connect with to trying to help them along the way. Kind of goes from there. There is a little side romance happening in this story as well, which I really enjoyed because I primarily read romance books, so I loved that little detail of the story. And yeah, I just really enjoyed this one. I definitely want to check out more from this author. I think her debut book is one people recommend a ton, so I definitely want to go back and check that one out. But this is One Good Thing, highly recommend. Next up is Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez. So this is an author that I read Take My Hand from her last year. Absolutely loved it. One of my favorite books of the year. And so I was really excited to just put her on my auto buy, auto checkout author list going forward. So this was her earlier release in kind of the start of summer 2025. And I definitely just jumped right into this one and really enjoyed it. I just love this author's writing and the way that she just transports you into her stories. This one in particular is a dual timeline. So we have present day as well as we jump back to post-Civil War era. In the present day chapters, we're following a heroine who ends up getting called back to North Carolina by her grandmother. She's actually estranged from her grandmother, and basically her grandmother reaches out and is like, hey, I need some help. Can you come here, please? So the main character, who is Nikki, she's super intrigued because she knows that her mother and her grandmother had a falling out decades ago, and so she never really had a relationship with her grandmother. She is also recently 40, and her own child is about to move away to college. So she's like, you know what? Let me go see what's going on here. So when she gets to North Carolina, her grandmother Rita ends up telling her a lot about their family history. She starts talking about African kingdoms, a community of formerly enslaved men and women who ended up grasping their own freedom on this mountain land that her grandmother calls home. In this book, I loved the deep connection of a family and land and how that kind of pulls into the tangled history of this family, as well as just seeing the generations of women in this family was super fun to follow. Like I said, in here, we also get flashbacks. It's dual timeline of post-Civil War as well. So I liked seeing the proud, strong people who decided to live on this land. They worked there, they thrived, they lost, they loved, all the things. It was super interesting to follow. I really thought it was neat how in the author's note in this one, which I just love reading author's notes in historical fictions in particular. And so in here, the author talks about how this book and this kingdom of Happy Land was based on many communities that did thrive and live this way. This book also brings attention to the staggering loss of land that was stolen from African Americans in our country and how that would equal up to millions of dollars today. So really enjoyed this one. Like I said, the author's writing in general, she'll just grab your attention from the start and never let go. Highly recommend this one. Love the cover. This is Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez. Next up is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is Taylor Jenkins Reid's newest release that came out in June of this year. This is an author who I have read all of her books. I always pick them up. So she's another like auto-buy author for me. This was another one of our Leave It to the Pros book club picks for June as well. I love this one so much. This one I actually appreciate even more like after having finished it, and just like I'm constantly kind of going back to some of the moments, some of the quotes in here, and just like really loving these characters. I feel like the more time away I've had from them as well. So this book is set in the 1980s, and we're actually following two women in the NASA program. The main character we follow in here is Joan, who she is an astronomer turned astronaut and one of the first female astronauts for NASA, while we follow another woman named Vanessa, who is a pilot in the NASA program. This book really feels like Joan's story. We see her life, her complex relationship with her sister, her really sweet, tender relationship with her niece. We see her work, her dreams, her wants, all of her thoughts, and her kind of growing friendship with Vanessa as well. At first, Joan really feels more closed off maybe to some of her own thoughts and her character as well, but as she becomes closer to Vanessa, you really see that she starts to open up more, and you really get to see more of her personality, Joan's personality that is, start to shine, and she really starts to come into her own. I really just like the journey of this book of like Joan really finding herself and figuring out who she is, what she wants in life, while she also is doing this huge job having these relationships with her family as well. In here, it really just blends like conversations about science and faith and family and beliefs, and of course all wrapped up in this like NASA space program as well. This book kicks off with quite the journey. It takes you on a ride through multiple years of these characters' lives, and I just really enjoyed it. This is definitely one of those books where you have to read until the very last sentence, which if you know, you know. Highly recommend if you haven't checked out Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I will say the audiobook in particular was a fantastic for this one, so highly recommend. Next is A Pair of Wings by Carol Hobson. This is one that I really enjoyed, especially the history elements of it. I will say there were parts in here that kind of lagged as far as the author's writing style, but for the book overall, the history that I learned in here, I really loved this one. So this is a historical fiction where it's actually based on somebody's true life. So in this book, we're following pioneer aviatrix Bessie Coleman, who was a Black woman who learned to fly at the dawn of aviation. So this takes us back to the 1920s in the US. Basically at the time in the US in 1920, no one wanted to teach a woman to fly, let alone a Black woman. So Bessie Coleman took it upon herself to decide to learn to fly. So she found out about a pilot's program that was happening in France. And so she decided, you know what, I'm gonna get there no matter what it takes. So she ended up going to kind of a college university where she was able to teach herself French. And then from there, she sailed across the Atlantic, got to France. So she learned to fly there, got her pilot's license actually 2 years before Amelia Earhart, which I thought was super interesting. And then she sailed back across the Atlantic back to the US. And it's when she got back to the US that she realized there wasn't really a career path that she could choose for aviation at the time, because this is obviously like a decade or more before commercial flights were even a thing. And so she realized that for her to have a career in aviation, she realized that she'd have to kind of perform and do stunt flying at like different air shows and kind of country fairs. So she decided to sail back across the Atlantic Ocean, get back to Europe, where she learned dangerous stunts by German and French dogfighting combat pilots. And so then she learned all of that, sailed back across to the US, and then ended up doing all of these like air shows and different like country fairs and kind of things like that with stunt flying. This one, like I mentioned, I loved the history of it, loved learning about Bessie and all of her adventures along the way. I loved how when she was a young girl and she first saw the Wright brothers fly, she ended up falling in love with planes and just wanting to learn everything she could about them, like how they stayed in the air, the math behind it all. And she was just very purpose driven. It took it upon herself to learn all of these things, the mechanics of flying, how planes were staying in the air, and then of course training and getting her own pilot's license as well. This was so good. Really enjoyed this one, like I said, especially for the history aspects of it. So highly recommend if you haven't checked it out. This is A Pair of Wings by Carol Hobson. Next up is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. So I think I'm late to the party in this one because I know so many people have read this author, love this book so much. I just read her book for the first time. This was my first read from her and I loved it this summer. I actually picked this up, like I mentioned, my Leave It to the Pros book club. We host historical fiction readathons every now and then, and so we had one in July, and this This was one of my reads during that week, and I love this book so much. This is another historical fiction told in dual timeline, and so in here we're following a woman in present day, and then we jump back to World War II in Poland where we follow somebody else's story. And so in the present day chapters, we're following Alice, who is a busy mom. She has 2 young children where her son is somewhat non-speaking. He uses like echolalia and some different like apps or programs on his iPad to communicate. And then her daughter is super young and she has a very high IQ. So on top of taking care of her children, Alice has a beloved grandmother who is actually kind of ailing. She's gravely injured and she's in the hospital where she has had a brain injury. And so she's actually not able to communicate anymore. So there's kind of this like communication barrier between the grandmother and any of the people visiting her at the hospital, which Alice's mother actually thinks that there's like no hope, there's no way to communicate with her own mom. And so Alice kind of proves that, hey, actually using some of the programs that my son uses, these programs on the iPad that you can kind of like communicate with, the grandmother is actually able to communicate with them that way. And she basically is very desperate for Alice to go to Poland and try to figure out some things about the grandmother's family and her history. So then, like I mentioned, it's in dual timeline. So then in the past timelines, we jump back to kind of the late 30s, early 1940s in Poland, in Nazi-occupied Poland, and into World War II. And it kind of goes from there. This one, I just really loved the connection of the characters in here. I feel like this author's writing I flew through it, loved it so much. I definitely want to check out more from her. I just loved seeing how both of these stories, the timelines kind of play into each other. I love the connections in here, the family as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This is The Things We Cannot Say by Kelly Rimmer. Like I mentioned, it's my first read from this author. So if you have any other favorites from her that I need to check out next, definitely drop them in the comments. Next up is American Sky by Carolyn Dasher. So this is a debut historical fiction from an author. I love this one so much. The author actually had reached out to me on Instagram and wanted to send me this ARC copy of her book. And I'm so glad she did because it put it on my radar and I was so happy to read this one early. This one is out now. It just came out in the summer of 2025. This book is actually available on Kindle Unlimited and it is like an Amazon Montlake published book. So it actually comes with the audiobook with the read and listen feature if you grab it from KU. So definitely check it out there. As you can tell from some of the other books that I love learning things in books and really feeling like immersed in these stories and the history of it. And so in this one, it is a chunkier book, but you definitely learn a lot in here. This book kind of takes place and we follow 3 different generations of women in this one family. So we get a lot of time with them. It kind of starts off in World War I. We get a little glimpse of that with one of the characters, and then it heavily focuses on World War II, especially the WASP program in the US. And then eventually we get to the Vietnam War as well. As you can tell by the title of this one, aviation plays a huge part in these women's lives. I loved how strong all of these women were and just following their journeys. Like I said, this is a lengthier read, but I feel like the journey it takes you on is just so good. I was so pulled into the story and couldn't get enough. So definitely recommend if you want a book that has a lot of history packed into it, that has characters, like very strong women characters that you just can't get enough of their journeys and you just want to follow along on their stories. This book covers like, I want to say 60 years with this one family. So highly recommend American Sky by Carolyn Dasher. Switching up the times a bit. So this is The Women on Platform 2 by Laura Anthony. This is one of my favorite books of the entire year. I love this book so much. Highly recommend checking it out. This is a historical fiction that takes place in the 1970s in Ireland. This book is based on a real life event that happened in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, like I mentioned, in the 1970s, about a group of women who brought safe and legal contraception to the women of Ireland. This is a book that really is showing these trailblazing women and their journeys and their struggles of how they got that to happen during this time, because in the 1970s in Ireland, it was actually illegal to have women's birth control, contraception of any kind. And so I loved seeing in here their journeys, their stories of how they got there, which is wild to me that this was even happening in the 1970s in Ireland, but it definitely, I mean, look at today as well. Anyways, that's a whole other side topic. I just love this emotional journey. I cried multiple times in this book, so it is definitely a heavy hitter. Definitely know that going in. Check some content warning. I know I have them in my review as well, so definitely check there before jumping in because it is an emotional roller coaster in here. In this book, we're following 3 women in particular, and we see how one of them, she was kind of a shop girl in Ireland, and she ends up getting kind of swept away by this charming young doctor. They get married. Everything's supposed to be happily ever after, but things change quickly on their wedding day when she realizes the man that she married is a bit of a monster, and it kind of goes from there. And then we see one of her friends that she ends up meeting who is a young mother at the time. She has, I want to say, I think 3 daughters with her husband, and she has another baby on the way. And basically something tragic happens to her life where her doctor basically tells her, like, you and your husband cannot have any more children. Like, your life is at risk. It's too dangerous for childbirth for you anymore. And there's no way to stop it because, of course, contraception is not legal where they live at the time. So it gets into this very like tricky, complicated storyline where this woman who is happily married cannot enjoy her husband as much as she might want want to because of the fact that her life is in risk if they end up getting pregnant. And so I just really loved her story as well. Definitely an emotional one. And then we see another young friend of theirs who is young and single, and she's just having fun and living life. And while she doesn't have a husband, she doesn't want to get married, she doesn't want to have children in the future. So a lot of people kind of try to tell her that it's not her life, not her problem. It isn't things that she needs to be worried about because it's a married woman's problem. So you kind of see her strong feelings on it and how she's like, no, this affects like every woman in our country. Like, I don't care if I'm married or not. This one's just so good. I love the characters' journeys and their lives in here, the storytelling, the writing. This is told in dual timeline and it just like effortlessly blended in, I feel like, where you're basically following a woman on a train and she is hearing the story of these trailblazing women in history. And so kind of learning these characters' stories by being on the train with somebody. I just loved it so much. The women's rights, the social justice, powerful characters and their struggles. I love this one so much. Highly recommend. It definitely made me think about all of these like different families in history who have had a huge family where maybe, you know, they didn't want to, but they didn't have a choice, like some of the situations and the women in the history of this book. So love this one to pieces. This is the Women on Platform 2. I think the ebook was available on Kindle Unlimited when I read it, and I want to say the audiobook I got from my library. So definitely check out there. Highly recommend. It's so good. Just know it has heavier content warning. All right, so then gonna switch it up to something a little lighter, a little more fun. So this is Let's Call Her Barbie by Renee Rosen. This one I love so much. It was honestly not on my radar, but then a friend read it during the historical fiction readathon that I had co-hosted, and she had loved the book, and so I was like, absolutely gonna go grab it from my library as well. And I'm so glad I did because I loved this one. As somebody who kind of grew up with Barbies and playing with them when I was younger, I just loved this aspect of history that I didn't know too much about. So it was super fun to learn about this one. This is basically a book where we are following the creators of Barbie and seeing the history of how the doll came to be, how it started out and kind of trying to get it off of the ground, how it almost didn't happen multiple times and kind of all the roadblocks put in the way along the journey. I just love this kind of behind the scenes look so much. It kind of read like those documentaries that are really popular right now of kind of following a company or a brand or a product that was really popular and how it like came to be. I loved following one of the creators of Barbie, Ruth Handler, and just seeing her being this like absolute boss of a woman in the 1950s and just kind of the powerhouse that she was. Like I mentioned, we get to see the creation of Barbie and all of the things that kind of led up to that, of them trying to figure out how to invent tiny little zippers for the clothes on the original Barbies and how they could have tiny little buttons and sew the clothes is just right, and getting fashion designers to help and invent these different things just for the doll's clothing that weren't maybe readily available at the time. I loved it so much. All the behind the scenes, the factories, all the different struggles that they have along the way of trying to make this doll happen, the right hair, the right makeup for her face, like everything I thought was so interesting. We also see a lot of the different people who were working for Mattel at the time and seeing the creators of Barbie and seeing a lot of their personal lives as well along the way. I just love this one to pieces. I thought it was so fascinating and so interesting. I flew through the audiobook of this one, so highly recommend if you want to check it out as well. All right, the next two are both paranormal historical fictions that both came out earlier this summer that I ended up reading. So the first one is The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is an author that I absolutely love. I think this is like maybe the fourth or fifth book I've picked up from her. Mexican Gothic is still my absolute favorite, but this book was so good as well. I just feel like this author does atmospheric, kind of more gothic vibes super well in her paranormals, and I loved this one. So this is a book where we're following three different women in three different eras and basically how all of their lives are kind of in danger and there's witchcraft involved and kind of how that plays into their story. This is a multi-generational horror saga, but historical fiction as well. In here, like I mentioned, we follow three different women. So the first woman is in the 1990s, like late 1990s, and she is a college student. The second woman we follow is an aspiring writer who is attending college during the Great Depression, so like the 1930s in the US. And then the third woman we follow is a farmer's daughter who is living kind of in the mountainside of Mexico in the early 1900s. So like I said, all of the three women in here, they kind of encounter witchcraft and danger. There's like kind of like an occult vibe to this one. Like I mentioned, this book is atmospheric and eerie. There is a lot of like paranoia around things happening in the story, which I just really loved. It's so immersive. I feel like you're pulled into it immediately. So I'd highly recommend checking out The Bewitching by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, which would be perfect for kind of fall going into spooky season right now. Then the next one is The Possession of Alba Diaz. This one I loved. It's a newer release. This is an author that I read all of her books. So she wrote The Hacienda as well as The Vampires of El Norte. Loved those ones as well. This one as well. The cover is stunning. This is a very atmospheric, paranormal, historical horror. So this book, as you can kind of tell by the title of it, it does involve a demon possession, and I feel like it was just so well done. This is taking us back to a Mexican silver mine in the 1760s. So it's like 1765, and we're following this woman who she ends up going into the silver mine and comes out a little different. This one, I will say, I wanted it to lean a little bit more into the paranormal horror elements of it. I feel like it didn't go like super into that. So if you don't want like overly creepy, I feel like it kind of held back a little bit. We also get in here, like this author, I feel like she likes to write like a romance kind of happening in the story as well. So I did enjoy that as well. Really enjoyed this one. I thought it was so interesting and atmospheric. Again, perfect for spooky season. So this is The Possession of Alba Diaz. All right, so those were the 10 that I loved, and I have an 11th one, which is a very, very short like novella short story from Madeline Miller. So this is Galatea. This is basically an ancient Greek retelling of Pygmalion and Galatea. So in here, this is a very feminist forward, feminist reimagining of Greek mythology, which is one of my favorite things to read. I love this one. It's super short. I want to say like 45 minutes or an hour audiobook from your library, or you can grab this like little short story version and read it as well. So in here, like I said, it's very much Galatea's story. And you see in here how Pygmalion is a marble sculptor who he decides he wants to create and form the most perfect, beautiful woman that he can. So basically in here, the gods or fates or whoever, they actually end up giving the blessing of life to the sculpture of Galatea, and she comes to life, and Pygmalion decides that he's going to marry her and keep her for his own. And he's very possessive and obsessive over her. He doesn't want anybody to look at her. He wants to be able to use, abuse, do all the things to her whenever he wants. He just sees her as kind of like there for like his beck and call to do whatever with. So there is some content warning in here because he actually ends up locking her up in kind of an asylum where he will go there and use and abuse her however he wants when he sees fit. So definitely some heavier content in here. But like I mentioned, this is definitely Galatea's story, and I loved seeing her just kind of come into her own, decide what she wants to do with her life, and how she is not there for this man who created her. Loved it so much. Definitely a Greek reimagining, feminist retelling, just a short story. I wanted more from this character, but at the same time, it was like perfect for her story at the same time. So yeah, Galatea by Madeline Miller. Highly recommend. A super short novella. All right, so those are all 11 historical fictions that I have loved recently, like in the last 5 to 6 months. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I always love talking and gushing about historical fictions, especially the ones that I love. I have even more historical fictions playlists and recommendations below. So if you want to check that out, I have a playlist, other videos for you to check out as well. Like I mentioned, all the books are in the description of the video as well. So if you want to go grab them for yourself, definitely go check those out. If you have any historical fiction books to leave me that you've loved recently, I would love to know. So drop your recommendations in the comments. And if you don't want to do any of that, but you want to leave me an emoji in the comments today to let me know that you watched this video, leave me the scarf emoji since we are into fall, very like bundling up type of energy. So leave me the red scarf in the comments. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!